the Honourable Attorney-General, Minister of Economy and Civil Aviation, Mr. Ayaz Sayed Kayum, the Honourable Minister of Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport, Mr. Fayaz Koya, Mr. Rajesh Punja, Chairman of Fiji Airways and Board Directors that are present, members of the Diplomatic Corps and international agencies, permanent secretaries, senior civil servants, members of the local and international sporting fraternity that are here tonight, representatives of the Fiji business community, esteemed invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bula, and good evening. It is a great honor to welcome you tonight to this very important event, the first since COVID restrictions were lifted. And yes, we have some big announcements. But before we get to the announcements, ladies and gentlemen, Fiji Airways has been working tirelessly for the entire 2 years prior to us commencing flying on the 1st of December. And it was all about being ready. And I'd like to share a lot of this with you tonight because I think it's important for you to understand more about your national carrier. In simple terms, we've achieved the impossible and we are thriving. In the months just prior to COVID resulting in the suspension of our international flying, we were actually celebrating. We were celebrating 10 years of successive growth in passenger numbers. In 2019, we achieved 1.7 million passengers. We were celebrating the first time we achieved a $1 billion turnover. And we were also celebrating 10 years of successive profits. And then, all of a sudden, on the 1st of April 2020, we faced unprecedented, daunting challenges. As a result of the border closures, our aircraft were put into storage and revenue dropped to almost zero. We were then faced with recurring monthly fixed costs of 39 million and enough cash to survive 4 to 5 months. The biggest problem was the uncertainty. When will we resume flying? And if we do, what will the ramp up to normal look like? How long will it take and how quick will it be? And I must say, during the first days, we were sitting in our boardroom, and I think like most people around the world, we were in a state of shock and bewilderment. What next? What do we do? And it was at that stage that, looking around, we saw that McKinsey's and company, as you know, leading consultants, were advocating that you use a process called the Kunavan Process, which is a framework for business chaos. It recommends that you take control and make sense later. And that's when it dawned on us. We have a fantastic process which we use for flight emergencies. It is called aviate, navigate, and then communicate. So aviate is take control and maintain control. Once you've made sense of it, then implement the appropriate measures, and then of course you communicate last. Well, we actually did communicate first, but nevertheless, what did we do under aviate? The very first thing we did was we looked at ourselves and said, we need to reframe our thinking and change our mindsets. We have to change to become focused on being adaptable, resilient, agile, influencing, curious, and courageous, and then immediately start on the journey to future-fit leadership. Now, there are many definitions of it, but here's what we were following. Leadership that understands you need to be learner leaders, and you need to unlearn what isn't working. We need to see our own mental model, how we see the world. We needed to understand the importance of questioning and leading through questioning. And finally, striving to have synergies and systemic synergies. The next thing we did immediately under aviate is we realized that our vision no longer applied. It was to be the most loved, the most flown, and most profitable airline. Well, certainly we weren't loved at that stage. We weren't flying, and we couldn't be profitable. So we created a common purpose, where we co-created this with our employees, and it was a purpose very simple, to to work together as one to ensure we survive and the moment borders open to thrive. And of course, another part of the Aviate immediate action was to implement cash preservation measures. We cut costs. We suspended anything that wasn't necessary. And unfortunately, we had to take the tough measure of terminating 50% of our staff. Those that remained, we basically allocated into 3 groups. A financial team that was working on maintaining solvency, both cash and also equity. A customer experience, engineering, flight operations and administration team that was focused on keeping the airline alive and ready. And this was a very important strategy that now with hindsight we can see was right. We kept the airline alive, ready to operate at the quickest and the shortest time. And we had a lot of programs working to ensure that. And finally, a revamp team. This is where we said we take on what Winston Churchill said, never let a crisis go to waste. And we said, what are the things that we normally can't do? So today we have 65 major infrastructure improvements in the business. A new revenue management system, new revenue accounting system, new fuel system called Skybreathe, and a new website, and so on. All things that you couldn't do in normal times. Once we'd finished that, we'd managed to bring that monthly recurring cash outflow from 39 down to 20 million. And we then said, well, we still haven't solved the problem. I'm sure you'll all remember from September onwards in 2020, we were blowing a lot of bubbles. There was the bubble that would maybe happen between New Zealand and Australia and ourselves, and all these bubbles came to nothing. And we had to bring sense to the uncertainty. And that's when we called in BNP Paribas, French merchant bank, but also major aviation consultancy. And we sat with them and we developed a 7-year monthly financing forecasting model. This model gives you income statements, balance sheets, cash flows, and the most granular detail. And we then started running models. And we did 32 versions with 32 different startup dates and 32 different ramp-up profiles. And this enabled us to immediately determine the level of cash we needed to raise for the different models. And we had to choose a base case. And this was basically back in November, December 20, we chose as a base case we would be flying by 1 April 21. At that stage, we then approached our government, the AG, and we requested support. And here I must tell you, I want to express our gratitude to the government of Fiji, the AG, the Prime Minister, for the sovereign guarantees, which are 561 million guarantees, long-dated guarantees that enabled us to raise 410 million new financing. And we would not be standing here today and in this venue if it was not for this support. We did one right thing, though, with this. We ensured that all the debt we raised has 15 years to repay it back, so a long time, and we managed in all cases except one to get a 4-year moratorium on capital repayments, only paying interest. So a lot of breathing space. We also raised special deals with our aircraft lessors. We're the only airline, I understand, that did this. We got 12 months rental payment deferrals, and the deferral turned into a 6-year loan. So we're paying the deferrals back over a long time. Again, very unique. 1 April didn't happen. So as part of our Navigate, we were ready with contingency plans. And it was to raise a further 100 million of loans, which we did, again, 15-year loans. And these we raised in the local market. I'm very grateful. We have a few of our bankers here today that assisted us with that. The others were done offshore. One of the major components of that contingency was how we would handle equity. Because throughout the period that I'm referring to, which was really up until April 21, the focus was mainly on cash. And raising enough cash to get to April 21 and enough cash beyond that for a slow ramp up. But we started in January 20 with a large balance of equity But we had obviously significant losses in 2020 and 2021, which diminished a lot of our equity. And our challenge was that if it went beyond 1 April, we would have to do an equity capital raise. That is, issue new shares to our shareholders and ensure that we restore capital in the business. So in August 21, we commenced with a capital raise of 200 million, and I'm pleased to say this has now been completed, and we've basically restored and added good equity into the business. We also did many other actions during Navigate. We kept our aircraft in active storage. We flew 17,300 tons of cargo, basically fresh produce being exported, a lot of transshipments, and very importantly, essential supplies like vaccines being brought into the country. We also did 523 repatriation flights. As I mentioned, as part of Navigate, in addition to these important financing measures, we also worked on being ready. And right from the very first day, our customer experience team worked on what we called our Travel Ready program, what the health and safety measures will look like when we fly. And they did a lot of research, a lot of designing, a lot of testing, and we employed medically qualified staff to become our wellness champions on the ground and in the air. And for this, we won 2 major awards in the world. We got the Apex highest diamond hospital grade safety rating for our Travel Ready program, and we're one of the few airlines, I think the only 5 in the world, that got the Skytrax 5-star COVID safety rating. When we realized there's an opportunity to start flying in December 21, the same team started working on a travel framework. What would the protocols be, the health and safety requirements on 1 December when we start flying? Again, they did a lot of research. They developed an amazing model, and I'm pleased to say this was largely unchanged by the stakeholders that finally ended up with the COVID health and safety requirements for the flying on 1 December. Our customer team continues today to strive for perfection, and with the tremendous work being done by our new executive chef, Richard Cross, we've just won the Apex Passenger Award for the best food and beverage in the South Pacific, an amazing award. Simultaneously to all this, our commercial team focused on being ready. Very grateful once again to government that gave us a 40 million travel recovery program amount, working with the hoteliers. And I must tell you, this is quite unique. In our boardroom, we had 11 hotel general managers sitting with us, which is quite exceptional because they normally compete. And they were sitting there working together with us, and we created very enticing holiday packages. Using $400 for 100,000 passengers, the 40 million was then spread between us. We kept 170 per passenger, hotels got 230, and together we created these 100,000 enticing packages, which undoubtedly created the right noise from October 21, when it was announced we would start flying in December, to get the momentum going, especially in the Australian and New Zealand markets, and more so in Australia. So I thought I'd share with you quickly all this. What does it mean in terms of performance? So since 10th of October, we have seen a very encouraging situation with our bookings held. I did a snapshot this morning for a presentation, and for the 6-month period, end of June to November, our bookings week on week are growing by 6%. Our total bookings held, as I stand here today, is 365,000 bookings compared to 334,000 in 2019. We're 9.3% ahead overall, and we still have markets closed, like Hong Kong, Japan, and the South Pacific countries. If I break that down into the different destinations we serve, I look at Australia first of all. For the same 6-month period, it is even crazily remarkable. In addition to the bookings held that are growing 5% week on week, total bookings are 193,000 compared to 155,000 for the same period in 2019. We're 24% higher. That means if you take the months from July through to November, and you take the 193,000 allocated over the months as they booked, we're 24% better than in 19. So it's really remarkable. USA, a little slower. It's growing by 6% week on week. And bookings held on 91,000 compared to 93,000. So it's 1.4% behind, but catching up quickly. New Zealand, for the same 6-month period, we're holding bookings of 78,200, and 19 was 78,050, so 0.2% better, but it's better, and it's growing quickly, and that's growing at 9% week on week. Now, I always say this is nice to hear, but what does that mean in cash? Because we measure the cash we bank. So our target is in an off-peak month to bank around 40 to 50 million. And in a peak month in 2019, we were banking 70 to 80 million. So here are the numbers. When it was announced from the 10th of October, for October we banked 37 million. These are Fijian dollars. November we banked 81 million. That's an off-peak month. And then December dropped to 52 because of Omicron. January 47, February 56, March 86, April 98, May 110, and June a whopping 115 million. So I'm also pleased to announce as a result of this, we have prepaid one of our loans. We prepaid 50%, which is $32.5 million US dollars, it's 72 million Fijian roughly, and it's one of our major COVID borrowings. Now, all this exceeds our optimistic plans. And I'm sure many of you standing here will say, well, André, you must all be smiling all the way to the bank. Well, as they say, the universe does not respect plans, and so this is not quite true. All the positive demand and this great performance I've told you about is dented by the huge increase in fuel prices caused by the Ukraine war. Jet kerosene this morning was 157 US dollars a barrel. Brent was 108, and the refining margin, the cost to refine, it's the difference. This compares with an average price in 2019 of around 78 US dollars a barrel. So there's no question going forward, airlines have no choice, and ourselves included, to implement substantial airfare increases. But this will not be enough. We have to explore and implement additional steps to grow revenue. So grow revenue is a key target of ours. And with that in mind, I'm very pleased to announce Fiji Airways' 20th direct international destination to grow revenue, and we say a big bulla to Vancouver, Canada. And as Edwin said, it's probably one of our worst kept secrets. Now, I walked in here earlier and I said, why have you put this all up? And they said, well, we can't put it up during, so we have to put it up before. So, starting November the 25th, we'll fly twice a week to Vancouver, creating that direct link for our tourism industry, cargo trade, and reconnecting Fijian families. It is estimated that the Fijian diaspora in Canada is approximately 80,000 people. Now, Canada has always been a very important tourism market for us, and introducing these direct flights and services will undoubtedly drive an increase in tourism to Fiji. In addition, these direct flights to and from Vancouver further strengthen the importance of Nandi as a trade and tourism hub, not only for Fiji, but for all the South Pacific countries. We will be leading a trade delegation on a promotion flight to Vancouver on the 9th of August to engage with the industry experts and our partners in Canada. We will take industry, trade and trade specialists with us and commence contracting and raising awareness of this new and exciting direct route. As part of this one-off flight, we are offering Fijians the opportunity to buy return airfares at the low price of Fijian dollars 1,099, and passengers in Vancouver will be able to book flights on this particular flight at a price of Canadian $5.99 return. So those are very attractive prices. So guess what? Buy now. So we'll also have some specials for when we actually start on the 25th of November, but these will be limited. So again, not every seat, but a number of seats. And we will keep the same pricing for those limited seats on the 25th for a few weeks. So we're also working, obviously, with a number of different organizations with a comprehensive marketing campaign, and we have our Tourism Fiji colleagues here today in collaboration with them and partners. And I thought it just important to mention that in 2019 and prior, Fiji Airways spends the same amount as Tourism Fiji on marketing Destination Fiji. And that's why we work closely together, because when we combine our spend, we have a lot more penetration. Ladies and gentlemen, Fiji Airways is a small national airline in the global sense, but we're a premier brand and we constantly punch above our weight. Now for the second important announcement. Earlier I mentioned the completion of our equity capital raise. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our two new shareholders and also strategic partners. Fiji National Provident Fund is now our second largest shareholder, holding 30.02%, behind the Republic of Fiji, which holds 51%. Our second new shareholder is the Unit Trust of Fiji, which holds 1.58%. I'd also like to welcome our new board members. Fijian Government-appointed Director, Avi Raju, who is Fiji Care's Group Executive Director, and FNPF's appointed directors, Dakshesh Patel and Sanjay Kaba. So I'm sure that you will join me in giving them a round of applause on their appointment. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending the time with us tonight and sharing these two very important announcements. We're obviously very excited with our direct service to Canada. And as I mentioned earlier, airlines around the world, when we thought we were basically out of COVID and getting back to normal, fuel prices now are a major challenge, and inflation that will come from it worsens it. But we're strong, we're adaptable, we're agile, we're influencing, we're courageous, and we will get through it. Thank you very much. Vinaka.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be very brief. André has told us all about the new announcements and the new initiatives, and of course the new shareholders. I'd like to acknowledge Minister for Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport, the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, André, of course, the Chair of Fiji Airways, the new board members and invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, a very important person too, our coach, Ben Gollings. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of years ago, about 18 months ago, when government took the initiative to support Fiji Airways, it did so in the backdrop of many other airlines in the world that in fact were suffering the same fate. For Fiji, of course, we did not have the capacity to provide direct funds to the airline itself. Countries like New Zealand, for example, gave about $900 million directly from their budget allocation to Air New Zealand. Fiji did not have the capacity, nor does it have the capacity. So we work very closely with Fiji Airways, André and his team, the chair and the board, to come up with a solution that will ensure that Fiji Airways remains flying. because we all knew that one day we'd get out of COVID. There had to be a game plan. We had to think long term. And we've obviously, as highlighted by André, we gave a guarantee, the largest guarantee we've ever given to any entity that government has a stake in. Of course, entities like EFL in the past, when it was known as FEA, did have cumulative guarantees amounting to probably about $400 million or in excess of that. But a one lump sum guarantee to EFL has never been done in the way we've done for Fiji Airways. It is very critical for us to ensure that we support our national carrier. As I've said on a number of occasions, Australians cannot drive to Fiji. They have to fly to Fiji. We're not in continental Europe. We cannot drive, for example, as they're doing from Canada to USA, or even Mexico for that matter. So if your economy, at least 40% of that, is dependent on the services sector, on the tourism sector, you have to be strategic about that. You have to ensure that you have a national carrier that does the bulk of the work, that brings the bulk of the passengers to Fiji. Otherwise, you will see the return on the tourism dollar spent dwindle tremendously. In many of the Caribbean countries, the return in $1, only 1 cent actually remains in the country, because all the airlines that fly into the Caribbean countries are foreign companies. Most of the hotels are foreign companies. They're even owned by foreign companies. So the dollar that remains in the country is very little. Most of the funds get repatriated. So strategically, it is critically important for Fiji Airways to remain afloat. When there is a cyclone, Fiji Airways is the last plane to be flying. When the cyclone is finished, it's the first airline to fly. So it goes to show, when you have a national carrier and the home base is in your country, it will do tremendous things for us. When we announced that the borders will open it on 1 December, if we did not have a national carrier, we would have been left to the whims of other airlines. No point announcing the border will be open on the 1st of December when other airlines would have decided, well, look, we'll start flying on the 15th of December or the 1st of January, because Fiji is not actually our priority. So that investment was made in Fiji Airways, and I'd like to please put your hands together for André and his team. You've done a damn good job. And I say this very sincerely from the bottom of my heart. If we did not have André, I don't know where we would be. And of course the board and people like Shanaz and Peter Sears, because they were able to provide that level of expertise, that level of commitment for us as a government to be able to support the national carrier. Frankly, I'm surprised that FNPF did not participate as a shareholder much earlier, because any person looking at a long-term investment and a quick rate of return would have actually invested in Fiji Airways a long time ago, in particular post the pandemic. Because if you actually have a long-term perspective, you know that if the share prices dwindle as a result of COVID, it would bounce back once the airline starts flying. In the same way, FNPF made a handsome return in the purchase of shares in EFL, and then they offloaded it to the Japanese. Fantastic rate of return. Many countries in the world, in particular like Singapore, where the superannuation funds have actually invested tremendously and heavily in their airports and indeed in the airline. And once those entities were running really well, commercially very viable, they were able to get fantastic returns on those investments. So we hope FNPF will now, their shareholders, as shareholders ourselves, we look forward to working with them. The airline is run very well, and the idea is now to be strategic about it, and indeed, of course, in the future to even find even more greater and better strategic partners. Vancouver is very exciting, of course. My mantra for Fiji Airways is that Fiji Airways flies to every single continent that rims the Pacific Ocean except South America. We're now doing San Francisco, LA, Vancouver, Narita, Hong Kong, Singapore, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington, except South America. So as André said, it makes us even more of a greater hub, not just for other Pacific Islanders, but indeed other countries beyond that look to Fiji for better connectivity. There are many Australians, for example, who want to fly from Australia to the west coast of North America, choose not to fly the direct flight, but choose to fly through Fiji Airways, through Nadi, which is great for us. We have, of course, in recognizing Nadi being the hub, now no longer require any departure tax for anybody that stays for 5 days or less in Fiji. That makes it even more attractive. Ladies and gentlemen, overall, there is, of course, from a macro global perspective, there are a number of uncertainties. The uncertainty, of course, in Europe itself. God forbid if the war spreads, we don't want that to happen. Many people did not know, actually, that Russia was the third largest producer of oil in the world, or supply of oil into the market. Many people did not know that, for example, Ukraine feeds 400 million people in the world today because of the wheat that they grow and the wheat that they supply. Many people did not know that Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine produces the bulk of urea and potassium that goes into fertilizer. Fertilizer costs have increased tremendously, fuel costs have gone through the roof, and of course wheat supply is limited, that's why the price of things are actually going up. These are certain uncertainties that we actually have to face. Although I don't like to quote Winston Churchill, because I do not agree with many things he did to the colonized world, but I think the quote that you did have was appropriate. We need to actually be very agile. We need to be responsive. At the same time, it's not just, we have to think about the here and the now, but it must be coupled with the fact that we need to think strategically and long term. And that is the trick in all of this. The idea is to get that right balance about addressing what needs to be addressed today, but at the same time having in place policies and strategies and a vision to ensure that you are able to place yourself in a much better position in 5, 10, 15 years' time. These are very exciting times for Fiji Airways, exciting time for us. We've recently visited the fantastic Aviation Academy in Nadi. Our pilots now will be able to have more Fijian pilots because we are able to do all the training in Nadi, in Namaka. Nobody ever thought of that previously. All our pilots needed to go to Singapore and various other places, pay enormous amounts of money for hotel rates, get a 2 a.m. slot in the simulators, and now they can get priority in the simulators. Indeed, it's been flipped. We now actually have people coming from overseas wanting to book our simulators. Our flight attendants, we met with a number of the groups that actually have been recruited. They're very excited, they're young. Today we have 65% of our population below the age of 35. Enormous opportunities, enormous strengths, enormous ability to be able to be again a lot more agile. We have, of course, a number of challenges in terms of many of our people are being poached by countries, our friends like Australia and New Zealand. Those are some of the challenges we have to deal with. Those are some of the issues that we have to be able to address to be able to ensure that we remain a viable economy. And Fiji Airways, no doubt, plays a pivotal role in ensuring economic stability, macroeconomic stability, building foreign reserves, and of course creating jobs. Thank you once again, André, Shanaz, Peter, various other members of the management team who I see here. We'd like to once again welcome FNPF as shareholders, a unit trust of Fiji also. Maybe on slightly over 1%, but it's a substantial investment for them. Unit Trust of Fiji, of course, is a very viable entity in itself, and those people who are unit holders, you're actually on a very good wicket, and indeed for FNPF members too, you are on a very good wicket also, because what we can see is that Fiji Airways will continue to be able to provide much better returns to all the members of FNPF and indeed unit holders of Unit Trust of Fiji. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here this evening, and I wish you a very good evening. Thank you.